So, to start off, I thought I'd talk about something that isn't necessarily directly having to do with this review, but is definitely in correlation to it, which is that as everyone who's going to watch this video and has paid attention to my channel will know, I, like so many others, have been banging my head against the wall for the past couple weeks trying to figure out why exactly Horikoshi has been rushing to the end of My Hero Academia. Is it because of him? Is something going on with him? Is it because of Shonen Jump? Is it the readership? Like, what's the deal here? And that is, of course, until a couple days ago, where from Neverworld, shout out to him, dug up our answer. So credit to him for this. I'll link his video in below. But if you haven't watched it, but basically, in order to sum up the whole thing, apparently, thanks to an interview transcript someone copy pasted onto Twitter, according to Horikoshi, the entire populace of Japan is pretty much the reason he's rushing to the end of the series, or as Horikoshi puts it plainly, like all the way back when the series was still in its early days, the popularity of the series took a nosedive the moment he got into the Forest Camp training arc, and he introduced the League of Villains. And here's the thing: on its face, that sounds like an isolated incident. Maybe it was something else, but maybe it had nothing to do with. Maybe it was just that wasn't a popular arc. I don't know. But the thing is, trends are kind of a funny thing, and when you factor in what happened with the Forest Training Camp arc and the introduction of the villains, and then correlate that with Season 5's anime adaptation, as well as Horikoshi as a writer and how he has given just as much creative love to how he writes the villains, sometimes making them even more compelling than the heroes, then things start adding up a bit. And at the bottom line of it, it comes down to cultural and moral differences. Whether we like it or not, the truth of the matter is, Japan has a much different set of cultural and moral values compared to the West. And while I don't want to say they necessarily have a black and white view of the world or their beliefs, when it comes to their beliefs, it sounds like the Japanese readership were perceiving the way the villains were written as Horikoshi legitimizing their actions, more than likely leading Horikoshi to butt heads with Shonen Jump themselves, and thus leading to where we are now in Horikoshi's announcement of ending it this year. And all this really just goes to show, it really is kind of a tragic state of affairs. Horikoshi's own, Horikoshi's own ability to write villains is what ended up being his downfall. Ultimately, is what ended up being the series' downfall. And honestly, this also just really goes to prove something I've been beating the drum about for a while, which is that for as big as anime and manga has become in the West, the one thing everyone, and I mean everyone, needs to understand is we do not matter. You watching this video, you do not have a voice in the anime manga industry unless you're in some way involved in it. The only thing Japan cares about is its reader base, its TV, its television audience, its viewers. Us here in the West are really just a second piggy bank to the Japanese. That's it. Of course, and again, just knowing that also kind of makes the reality even more grim, as there are many who watch the anime and read the manga here in the West who love the villains and again think of them just as great, as even better than the heroes, and just it's a shame because it makes what pushed, and it just all makes sense and makes what pushed Horikoshi to this all the more tragic. Again, I'll link for Neverworld's video into the description below, but yeah, that's it really is kind of a tragic state of affairs, unfortunately. I never even thought of that being the case, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized, yeah, it was the villains ultimately, and that's again just kind of a shame, a tragic shame. Honestly, But anyway, moving on, long-winded rant out of the way. We get a more in-depth look of what happened to Toya and Dabi after the first time he died. And honestly, one thing I will say that I found absolutely twisted, but also kind of ironic, is how the whole purpose of the League of Villains was for nothing more than to serve as basically backups should pretty much anything happen to Shigaraki, showing, unsurprisingly, that All For One has no connection to anyone and only sees everyone as tools, a means to an end. And yet, ironically enough, ironically enough, ironically enough, ironically enough, ironically enough, Shigaraki actually found purpose in the league and legitimately, and despite them supposedly needing to be used as tools and a means to an end, Shigaraki actually formed real bonds with them in itself, showing that despite him bringing the league together for believing that the league came together for relatively the same broad purpose of destroying society as it exists in the same way that All For One did, Shigaraki at his core wasn't as callous or as heartless as All For One. Like and as we say, he does genuinely care for the league, and just that small difference in itself does show the major difference, but does show the difference between All For One and the major difference between someone like Shigaraki and All For One, and that in itself could be kind of that one small difference could be the key that ends up being the thing to saving him. So yeah. With that said, though, I'll need everyone's help on this because all the stuff we get with Dabi and frankly like the whole backstory with the League as a whole in this chapter, while amazing, is also starting to feel a little contradictory from what we know, because initially, from my understanding, from the beginning when all the known members of the League that we know today came about, is that they all gathered together through like word of mouth from Stain's actions and a little help from Giron. And while I'm not saying All For One didn't have a part to play in bringing the League together, this makes it seem like he was at the forefront of everything having to do with their lives, and especially helping Dabi with his surgery. Like, it's one of those things where it makes sense on a logical level, but I'm having trouble, like, squaring it and fitting into the continuity of the series as a whole. Like, something, like, he's, in some ways, I guess Horikoshi hasn't really, this is one of the reasons Horikoshi never really dove too deeply into who these characters were to begin with, in order to give that platform to explore this. But I don't know, something about like this little piece of history we get with Dabi, it feels in conflict with a little bit of the history, with the initial like forming of the League or something like that. I don't know. It makes sense logically, but fitting into the continuity of the series is the harder part. And again, go wild in the comments. Tell me if I'm wrong or not on that, because I'm having trouble kind of figuring it out myself, honestly. Of course, knowing all that, though, as we see, Dabi's gone ballistic. He's ready and willing to wipe out everything within the radius of his powers, even if he dies for it. Well, Shoto is gonna put everything into stopping him and save him from that fate. Like, we'll just have to see if Shoto is strong enough now to do it, because as the narration says, Dabi's given himself to all his anger, his hatred, and not just towards Endeavor, but to everything he hates about this world. Like, he's basically a walking firestorm right now, who's going to burn everything in his path, anything that crosses his path. So Shoto's going to have to pull off some kind of a miracle that involves containing Dabi's fire right now. And again, I assume Shoto has it under control, but even knowing that, it's going to take everything he's got from both the side that he inherited from his father and the side he inherited from his mother, just to kind of contain this, just to make something happen. And I will admit, for as much as I am questioning the continuity of it, seeing Dabi's desperation, seeing him like want to return to Endeavor and still after all that to prove to prove his worth, only to see nothing, only to see ultimately that the same nothing had changed. The same thing had happened with Shoto, and that he even felt like he had been forgotten. It really is kind of a, and that forgotten and replaced. It's kind of a tragic case of circumstance, but also kind of uplifting with how Shoto was ultimately like able to move past it to become a better person compared to Dabi, who, again, by tragic fate of circumstance, he just ended up doing further to his despair and his anger. And man, oh man, the artwork on Dabi's whole body as it burns, like, and letting him and setting himself on fire. Again, it is both the most graphic and horrifying thing that Dabi, and most horrifying that Dabi has ever been, and just begs the question of how you oppose such raw force. And like, how are you supposed to fight something like that that's just going to burn you up upon like impact or upon contact? Like, how are you supposed to overcome something like that? And actually, just the artwork on the chapter as a whole was in some way or another on point. Even with the tiniest of details, like the fire itself, was just incredibly drawn. So I think that's one thing I can at least take away, is that for however many problems right now the series has, I can at least say the artwork's always good. And honestly, again, I've said this before, I'll say it again, I really think Horikoshi needs to consider doing like a zombie type manga if he's ever interested in doing something after My Hero Academia. But yeah, guys, that's all I got for this review. If you enjoyed the video, like, comment, subscribe. I'm on Twitter, Analyst Control. Be sure to notification bell, the subscribe button, and just everyone, guys. Dark Knight of Anime, signing off. Later, everyone.